Here we go. All right. So hello everyone. This is our third edition of our panel, career panel. And today we're going to have Nishan Shrestha and Mauricio Gomez Viloria. So Nishan graduated from here, OSU, with his PhD title in 2021, right?
2020.
2020. In 2020. And now he's assistant professor at the Kansas State Medical Center.
University of Kansas.
University of Kansas, thank you. And he got this position how long ago, Nishan?
I started here last year.
So he is about a year working there.
Yeah.
And the other side, we have Mauricio. He did his undergrad at Simón Bolívar University in Venezuela. He did his master and PhD at Strasbourg University in France. And now he's a postdoc in the French Optics Institute, if I'm right. He's a postdoc over there. So we're gonna get into what you're doing a little bit more detail. So let's start with you, Nishan. Can you tell the everyone what are you doing now? Like what you do as an assistant professor there?
Yeah, sure. So I took this position here last year, so it's been a little over a year now. So my position is one of my title is assistant professor, but also I'm a clinical medical physicist. So I have two titles. I have my duties are shared between clinical work and teaching and research. So right now, currently, I do 80% clinical work and I do 20% of research and teaching. We have so in terms of teaching, we have medical physics residents, we have medical residents, we teach courses to them, and then part of my work goes to the research. And then talking about 80% of the clinical work, I mean, I'm not sure how much you guys are aware with medical physicists. So I work with radiation oncology. We treat cancer patients here in our department. So I work with the physicians and therapists and treat cancer patients with radiation. So I'm part of the team.
Cool. So you graduated here and you did your thesis and projects in medical physics, right?
Yes. So I can kind of go back to how it started. After graduating from my undergrad, I started the program in 2013. I enrolled as a PhD physics. And then in my first year, I worked with Eduardo Ikihara. He used to be a professor there in the radiation dosimetry lab. It's in the Venture One. It's off campus. It's a group with Dr. McKeever. So I started working with them on the research projects. It was experimental research in radiation detection. So within the first 2 years of working with them, I start to think about like where I want to go, where you want to do after you graduate, and that's when I guess you can say like kind of came upon medical physics, which I had no clue until I joined the lab. So I just ran into the program, and then once I saw that, medical physics is more applied, it's in the clinical, helping cancer patients, and at the same time, I could do research and teaching. So I was more interested in that, and then that's when I decided to enroll in a master's in medical physics program, which used to be available at OSU. I don't think it's available anymore. So I did a concurrent PhD in physics and master's in medical physics.
Okay.
And the master's in medical physics is a requirement to be able to work in this field. And then I graduated in 2020 with my PhD in physics, and I finished my master's in medical physics around 2019. And then after that, I came to University of Arkansas for medical science for my residency. So all the medical physics graduates, they have to go through a residency program. It's a clinical residency program where they teach you how to work in a clinic and how you treat cancer patients and working with the different equipments that we have. So I did 2 years of residency. And then after finishing my residency in 2022, that's when I joined here at KU Med. and been working for a year and a half now.
Cool, cool. So I guess instead of doing a postdoc, you had to do the residency. That will be kind of your postdoc training,
Um,
analogous to.
it's slightly different. Postdoc is more research based, right? Ours is my residency is more clinical, directly how it's kind of train you what you'll be doing throughout my career. So it's kind of like a basically a internship, you can say like a 2-year internship of what I'll be doing. Because because we're working with patients because in the coursework in the classroom, you're just taking courses. But in the real world, you got to go outside and, actually be doing the job and working with patients. So what they want to do is they want you to be able to be work independently and kind of train you of how to do the work. So which is kind of builds up on the courses that you take, but also it's kind of be able to working with equipments in a hospital setting, working with patients and working with medical doctors, which you don't get to do while you're just taking courses. So it's kind of different, I will say, in that sense, postdoc versus residency. And there are also medical physicists in my position who actually did a couple years postdoc and then have to do residency.
Hmm.
But that's more for if you really want to, if you want to spend more time on research, if you want to, write R1 grants, I think having postdoc definitely helps as well. But residency is a requirement in our field.
Can I ask?
Yeah, sure.
So Nishan,
Yeah.
hi, glad to
How
see
are
you.
you, Claire? Good to see you. I was telling Rusty you're the only familiar face I see.
Yeah. So Nishan, how competitive is this area?
Huh?
How competitive it is in this area? How easy
Um,
it is to get a job? How easy,
So currently in medical physics job in job market, there's a lot of demand. The jobs are there. The competition or the highly competitive is the residency part.
I
And
see.
there's a lot of graduate program as well. You can sign up for any graduate program. There's a lot of options. You can maybe get assistantship, maybe not. But there's a lot of graduate program. The problem is, or not the problem, the limitation is there's only limited residency positions. Right now, maybe there's like 130 or 140 in the whole country, and you have 600 applicants.
Mhm.
So that's where it's highly competitive to get in. But once you get into residency, I don't think there's any difficulty finding a job.
Mhm. And you mentioned that for residency you need medical degree, already medical physics degree.
Yes, to get accepted into the program, you would need a medical physics degree, because we also get certified by American Board of Radiology. So we have to take a certification exam, which is the end goal. And residency is part of the certification process, and medical physics degree is also part of the certification process. So if you don't have a degree, you will not get into residency. If you're not getting into residency, you cannot apply for
I see.
certification.
I see. So Nishan, one more question and I will be shut up soon.
No, no, it's actually no, it's a good questions. I mean, I'm sure it's beneficial for everybody there.
Can our students, so you mentioned, and you're right, that medical physics is not an option right now at OSU in our department. We don't
Yes.
have this program anymore. Can our students take this program online, get masters in medical physics online, or this is impossible,
Um,
or it
so
doesn't make
master,
any sense?
yeah. So masters in medical physics program online, I don't think there's any option at all at the moment.
I see.
I mean, I can say certainly maybe one in the whole country I don't think there's any. But so what a lot of the PhD students or the PhD graduates do is there's an option called a graduate certificate program, and that is a 1-year program. So what ABR or our accreditation organization is called CAMPIP. What they did is people who come from a PhD physics background or PhD engineering background, because our field is very interdisciplinary. So they want to keep it open and available for all different kinds of students from coming from different background. So there is a certificate program, which is 1 year course. It's a crash, sort of like a crash course. You take 6 courses that you need for the medical physics uh, in our field, and then you can take that course over 1 year or 2 year. So that is available, but that's only specifically for PhD graduates. So you have to have a PhD, and then you can enroll in that certificate program.
I see. Thank
Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other question for Nishan? Yeah.
Sorry. So I have a question. I have two questions essentially. So one is it the residency, if you do it in a different part of the world, is it transferable to America, or is it how international is the field? So that's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you want to work in the US, the residency program has to be accredited by a US. There is an accreditation called CAMPEP. So they are the ones who give, they go over these residency programs. They go over to these hospitals and clinic, academic institutions. They review their process and they give them a go, give them approval. So to be able to work in the US, you need to be graduate of those CAMPEP approved residency programs. Because yes, you have residency programs all over the world. But if you want to work in the US, they look for this CAMPEP's approval. And there are approval in there's institution in Canada that's approved by CAMPEP. There's institution in Germany, in Korea, I heard there's one. So they are expanding a little bit outside of US as well. But to answer your question, yes, it has to be approved by this CAMPEP accreditation, which is a US institution, US organization.
Okay. Slightly different question. Second one is,
yeah.
So are there any fields besides getting into clinical training or academia for medical physics, say industry, for instance, you could work in some company?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah, medical physics, working in a hospital, working in a clinic, that's one area where we medical physicists work at, which can be 100% clinical job, treating cancer patients. And depending on where you go, like some big academic institutions, Mayo Clinic, MD Anderson, Duke, I mean, they all have their programs, and so a lot of their faculty members, there are 100% research. So they don't do any clinical work. All they do is, write grants, have postdocs, grad students, and you can fall in between. You can do 50% clinical, 50% research. So you do some part of clinical, and then you also write some grants, have maybe a fewer grad students or postdocs. And definitely there's the industry where we work with these companies that make these equipments that we use in these different cancer centers. They're always hiring. They're always looking for medical physicists, who come from that background, who understands radiation physics a little bit more than someone who comes from just a general physics. They prefer medical physics graduates in that sense. And regarding their R&D, they have R&D process, even sales, when they send out graduates to sell, work on who has a better knowledge of the equipments, and also training. They will train you on certain aspects, then they send you to different locations and you train other people. They just want somebody who understands radiation physics, who understands how it's applied to cancer, and so somebody who coming from a medical physics background. So they prefer those graduates. Having said that, I mean, they also hire people who come from a physics background and maybe a little bit programming, or here and there's some slight overlap in radiation physics. Doesn't have to be medical physics graduates. I have friends who graduate from our program. They're also able to find jobs in these kind of industries that are making equipments for cancer treatments.
So now we're gonna pivot to the other side of the world, in France, and less practical application. Mauricio's doing a theoretical optics. He's gonna tell us a little about his postdoc. Also, a fun note: he works in the same lab as the Nobel Prize winner award of last year in physics. So, how is it working with a Nobel Prize winner, Mauricio?
I'm not working directly with Alain Aspect, but yeah, So last year I started my postdoc in the Institut d'Optique, or Institute of Optics. It's a very well-known institute in France because it was founded by Charles Fabry, the scientist that made the Fabry-Perot interferometer. And last year, when I was starting, we received the news that Alain Aspect, who is working there, who did his experiments there, got the Nobel Prize in physics for quantum entanglement. But I'm not related to him in any way. I'm not working with him. I'm not working with his team.
So can you tell us a little bit more of what you're doing and what do they do in the lab?
Yes. Okay. So it's also an engineering school. In France, it's very particular because there is this two systems for graduate school. So the people that go into engineering schools and the people that go into university. I did my master's in this university track and my PhD also in a university. And now I'm working in this engineering school, which is more applied physics, but still there are some teams working there in research. It's an institute that is working with anything related to optics. So whatever you can think about optics, so there are teams working on lasers, working on applications, on detectors, on telescopes, and nanophotonics. And I'm working right now in a subgroup of in the nanophotonics group, but I'm working on thermal radiation. And my background is not from optics. My background is from condensed matter and mesoscopic physics. And we're trying to bridge the gap between thermal radiation and other kinds of radiation that can exist at the nanoscale. So I'm working right now in thermal radiation in the near field, and what we call now the extreme near field, when distances between objects are smaller than 1 nanometer. And thermal radiation is not only optical, it's not only due to photons, but it can be mixed with electrons and other kinds of carriers like phonons, for example, which is kind of more exotic. Yeah.
So any questions for Mauricio as of now? Yes, go for it.
Yeah, so how did you find your current postdoc position, and what was your biggest challenge in postdoc hunts?
Yeah. I started when I knew that I had to write my thesis and I have a year to finish my thesis. I started looking for postdocs. So I tried to start early with this search, and it's not easy because you usually don't know where to start. So if you want to find a postdoc, the best advice I can tell you is to start very early, because then you start asking the right questions, and you can get to know where do you have to look for these postdocs. So I try to ask my advisors, I try to look on the web, I try to ask in conferences. And at some point, there were some people related to my team that were looking for postdocs. I tried to apply to this these positions, but maybe I was unlucky due to publications, so I didn't get some of these positions. And when I was getting closer to my PhD defense, I started to get in more recommendations to apply to certain places. And at some point, it kind of started working, right? I had the right letter that I could send to certain people. People were interested. I did at least 4 different interviews, and in the end, I got the position I have right now. Specifically with the team I'm working right now, there was no link in between the researchers in my team and my new team with respect to my previous team, but there were some overlap in the community, so they knew each other, they had seen themselves, so my advisor had seen my current boss in some talks, and they kind of knew each other, but they never contact, they have never contact between themselves. And I saw that they had a position, I applied, and that worked at the time.
So I have a question for both of you. You said that you had some interviews. Can you like describe them? And the same for you, Nishan. I guess you went through some sort of interviews at some point, even before getting the assistant professor position or resident, or before getting the residency. So could you both explain a little bit how are these interviews? And I don't know. You said you have 4. Are they like a 4 stages interview or 4 different like?
No,
places?
for different positions that where
Okay.
I had to, and in the end I had to choose between 2 different ones.
Okay.
The interviews were very different because there were different fundings and different labs, and my experience was I had to ask always what was going to be the interview. So in some interviews I had to mainly present myself. In some interviews it was more like a discussion, and in other interviews the person offering the position was also presenting something.
What about you, Nishan?
So, yeah, my interviews were slightly different. So during residency interviews, they are more, because it's medical physics, it's kind of not a very common, or it's kind of new in the field. Residency wasn't kind of required until 2014. They made it mandatory. So there's still like, this was a growing field. And because of that, I think, well, in my experience, what they're looking for actually now, I'm sitting in this position, being assistant professor and interviewing other applicants here, what they look for typically is like why you want to do medical physics, more of like general questions rather than your technical expertise, because we see that you already took the courses, and you did some research. So here, because we have also like 20, 30, 40 applicants, and they're all, good. So they're all applying here. So what we are more interested in, like, can you work with people, more like teamwork, why you're interested in medical physics, do you have a vision of what you want to do? Like more those kind of questions rather than digging deep into what you did for research or things like that. That's for residency, and definitely for faculty position, definitely, yeah, that was more of a interview where I have to present my research. I talk about what my research goals are, and that was more technical when I applied for assistant professor. But for residency, it's more they want to see why you're interested in the field and so forth.
Cool. So what do you think, that also, as well for both of you, feel free to answer any order. What do you think are the main attributes they look at when applying? I don't know, papers published, oral presentations, I don't know, GPA, I don't know. Yeah, recommendation letters. What do you think was the most important thing they said, like, oh, we're taking this person over all the applicants?
That's a
I
tough
think it's hard to
question.
say. Yeah, it's hard to say because you
Yeah.
don't know, you never know why you got accepted or why you got rejected. That's hard to assess. Sure. One thing that they ask you is, why do you want to take this position? The other thing that they want to know is what are your tools? What is your toolkit? It's not about presenting your research. Well, for me, it was not only about presenting my research. They wanted to know what I was doing specifically doing my research. So what kind of computational tools or what kind of theoretical tools I was using. And of course, there is some way to give to recommendation letters, of course.
Yeah, I think I agree with Mauricio. It's kind of the same, no matter what residence or job. I mean, when you say GPA, I mean, they all have a certain weight. I mean, you don't need a 4.0, but you don't want a 3.0. They might think about like, hey, why is there, it's too low or something like that, for sure. And definitely, your presentation skills, you give presentation, you give talks, you answer questions. I think it's a overall process, and just try to try to do good on each aspect is more important than just really good on one thing. Um,
Okay, so
Can I answer
yes.
your question?
Yeah.
Since I've been on many research committees, so the process is quite, at least in academia, the process goes in this way. The first step, you get, let's say, this many applicants, and the first screening is, as Nishan and Mauricio said, research statements. What people are interested in, why they are interested in this area, why they want to join your group. And at this point, it's very important to tailor your research statement for each place you apply. So, for instance, you apply to, I will talk about particle physics, which I know better. You apply to neutrino, you're writing about neutrino, why you like neutrino, but you also want to make an overlap with the research group, what they are doing. Then you apply to another little bit area, you write about that area, how you can contribute to this particular group, what you can bring to them. So the second part is your letters of recommendation. And these are super important, and that's why what Nishan and Mauricio mentioned, networking is super important. You need to know, and it has to be at least a year before, who will be writing your letters of recommendation. So these are super important processes. And after that, if you got screens, through all of the first screening, and you are invited for the interview, then you have to basically be, as we call, yourself. Be friendly, be nice to people. Just show what you know, and again, you have to show that you are really willing to work with the group. That what exactly new things, or maybe not new things, but what kind of skills, unique skills you have that it will be a kind of advantage for this particular research group. And in that sense, I think that some groups are really just, in some sense, sometimes it doesn't depend on you very much. Sometimes you can say, you are perfect candidate, but you just, they don't need people, So that's the problem. But in majority of the cases, when people see you as a bright person, who really wants to work with the group, they really just, select you over others. So that's how usually it happens.
I want to add a comment that one professor once told me. Celso, you might remember him, Mauricio. He told me like every single time you request a recommendation letter, the question should be, can you write a good recommendation letter for me? You gotta emphasize good, because many professors might say yes, and they might not write bad things about you, but they just write a generic thing that the reader on the other side is gonna read and say like, okay, whatever, and not taking into account. So I think that's a really important lesson there, a good recommendation letter. So I want to get a little bit deeper on that last year on your PhD studies, because you're doing dissertation, you're applying for jobs, you're looking for I don't know, sometimes we don't even know where to go. I don't know if it was your case, but I'm getting there. I'm still kind of like feeling weird about it. So I don't know. Can you describe a little bit how was that period for you guys? That very last year of your PhD program.
I can speak on my case. For me, it was pretty rough, pretty challenging too, because I was applying for residencies and I was writing my thesis, and then I have to defend, and then my residency interviews. So it's like medical residency interviews. So you apply to like 30, 40 places, and then they invite you. You have to fly there. You have to give interview. You present. So I had to go to like 7, 8 places, and then I had to pay for all of that. So so it was pretty rough, trying to go through that. But also at the same time, you kind of, I guess after the first few, you kind of get used to it. You kind of get a feel of what the interview looks like after the first few. So then you got to get in a role on the interview side. And the writing part, I mean, I think you did all your work, it's just a matter of putting it together at the end of the day, right? So you just got to sit down and just force yourself to write, because you've been doing this for 4, 5, 6 years. So I think it's more of a challenging of giving time, and just trying to manage time and try to get stuff done on time, I think, was the challenging part. And also for my case, I was also concerned about, okay, if I don't get residency, then I was also thinking about postdocs. So that's another thing I was also have to think through, what am I going to do if I don't get residency? So there's also that. And then do you want to go to industry? So there's a lot of things that goes, because I think at the end of the day, sometimes you don't know how it's going to turn out, right? You give it your best and you see what happens. And then if this doesn't work out, then you start looking for the other things. And at the end of the day, I think it's just, if you want to focus on something. I knew that if I had to also do a postdoc, I knew I was going to apply for residency the next year. So just kind of like keep in mind where you want to go, have your end goal, and then these other things that comes in between and can always be like intermittent, and just pass by that and keep applying, I guess, on what you want to do. So
Cool. Any comment, Mauricio?
Yeah. I think writing a PhD thesis is hard. It's not. You don't have to think. I don't think anybody's going to tell you that it's easy, and you have to dedicate a lot of time on it. And thinking about the future it's maybe not the best thing to do, in the sense that it can take some of your time and give you some anxiety that is not good for writing a thesis, right? But it has to be done. It has to be done in parallel with this writing of the thesis. And that's why I advise to start as early as possible, because once you understand a bit the strings and how you apply and where do you find your positions, and you start thinking of what you want to do, that helps a lot to do both things at the same time. Yeah.
Okay, I have another question, unless someone else has a question. It's like for international students. I was talking with Nishan some weeks ago, and I don't know the visa process, and I don't know. Can you tell us a little bit more about all of that? Because I know we graduate here in the U.S., we have OPT, but then after OPT, there are several options, several paths, and as well, you, Mauricio, if you want to add some comments about how is it being an international student in France, and how does that work over there?
In France, maybe it's not the same system, and I'm all used to renewing my residency every time that I change contracts. But yeah, you have to think, oh, this contract is going to end, my PhD is going to end, I have to find something, and that pushes you to find something very early. But France has some options, in the sense that if you don't find anything after your PhD, you can take 1 year to look for a job. And even after your job, if you don't find something, you can have a 1 more year to find something else.
So, oh, what about you, Nishan?
Yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, most of you I see international students. Yeah, I think it seems like France has a much easier, better process than the US. Because in US, if you don't have a job, you have to leave the country in 2 months or 3 months, I think. No matter you have OPT or H1, doesn't matter, right? Like you need to have a job in hand, or you have to be working even if you have OPT. So yeah, I mean, in my case, before I think you have a 3 months ahead, you apply for OPT, you know your OPT is coming, and then you don't have a job yet. I think that also kind of puts a lot of stress to find the job in that sense. However, I think I recommend to have, just apply those things ahead of time. Um, that way, if you do have a job, even it's okay if you lose a few months out of those OPT work permit that you guys get. I think it's fine because we get the STEM OPT that's another 2 years. Um, and yeah, I did my residency through my OPT. I mean, I got 3 years, but then when you apply for a job, then you have to look for H1. You got to make sure that the company that's sponsoring you gives you H1. Good thing with academic institutions or not-profit organizations is that it's not a lottery, so that's good, right? So you can get it in like a month. That's for H1. Um, and then also you can look into applying for permanent residency. There's different categories you can look into. I think that at least makes you, less worried about maintaining the H1 and OPT and all the status. So you can start looking into that. Actually, you can even look into them now. I think I would recommend. I kind of started later in the end, but if you can start early looking into those processes, I think it's better.
Will be recommended to hire a lawyer for that, or maybe just doing it by yourself? I don't know.
Um, So it depends on case by case basis. I have friends who did it themselves. I have also friends who use the lawyers. If you have the money, I say use the lawyers. If you don't have the money, then you have no choice, is my take on that. But if you have the money, I'll highly recommend to use the lawyers because that makes a much smoother case. If there is any questions, the lawyers are there. So that's how I will approach that process.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna open the floor for everyone's questions or comments. Also, people in Zoom, feel free to just speak up if you have any question or comment you want to do. So, anyone? Yeah, go for
I have a
it.
general question regarding postdocs and like the how accessible is it for internationally? So how are they similar in any case, or is this like a university by university basis contract thing? Is there any semblance of periodicity in these applications per se? Like if you apply, you sort of I think the big things to do is like apply in websites in academic jobs something like that. But is there any sort of semblance of order in them, like, or is it just like very random for different countries, different institutions?
I may answer that because I
Yeah.
applied to some different places. No, it's very random and chaotic. I mean, it depends a lot on the countries,
Yeah.
and it depends sometimes even on the university. So different countries have different ways of proposing these postdocs. Countries like the UK is more like you apply to a scholarship and then you have to connect this scholarship to some research. In France, it depends on if the funding is from a national source or if it's some international source. And nobody is just, oh, I have the funding, let me just write something on my website. They don't do this. So most of the time you find yourself asking and they tell you, yes, I have this funding, why didn't you ask before? And that can be sometimes frustrating, but the best thing I can say is that sometimes you have to contact people and they will tell you how it works.
Okay, I think so. The thing I get from this is to just get a position through word of mouth. If you have that capability, just network a lot and like make yourself seen in the community. I guess I think that's a little hard in most communities, but
It depends a lot on the community. I know that, for example, particle physics communities have websites dedicated to posting a lot of these positions. I was in a small mesoscopic community that they try to send by email some of the positions that they open, but sometimes you have to look good for yourself and just either ask people or try to see if in their website that something has changed and something has appeared, and
Do you think that conference
write an
helped for
email.
that?
I think conference help a lot, but it's not easy. It's not always easy to just contact people and say, "Hey, do you have something?"
That'll be weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to do this, and when I was writing my PhD thesis, it was year 2 of COVID, so conferences were online, and I didn't have this opportunity before. So maybe conference help in the sense that sometimes now I'm in conferences and I see that people write in their slides, "We have positions, please talk with us."
No, I think even in my field too, networking definitely helps because not all the time there's an opening, but if you know people, then they know, if they know you, then they can understand that, hey, maybe you're a good fit for this opening, so they might recommend you. So not necessarily you have to ask them. So like for LinkedIn, if you have some LinkedIn profile, I think that also helps if you have like looking for positions and if you have some CV up there. So you never know, I think. But also, like Mauricio said, you do have to be proactive. You know, if you have to go to the university's website, you know, in my case, it is the hospital's website, and they have different faculty members. They are always looking, if they're looking for positions, they have open positions. You can see the requirements. Because, like I said, especially in medical physics too, it's a very interdisciplinary field. So even though you're not from medical physics, you can still apply. And I had physics from friends from different labs actually at OSU. I have from actually 2 students from Dr. Zhou's lab in the biophysics lab. They are now in medical physics, medical physics field, but their research were more, like biophysics, NMR. I don't know what they did, but they somehow transitioned to medical physics. So depending on different openings, the expertise and the tools that you gain from whatever field you are in can be easily transferred to what your faculty members looking for, and it's just a slight transition. And if you're interested in that area, you can easily like switch between that areas too.
Any other
I
questions?
can
Yeah.
I
Go
can
ahead.
maybe add a short story of mine. When I was in the early times of trying to apply to these positions, I did something that I maybe shouldn't have done. Is that I saw some website that had, "Hey, we have a position." It was somebody very interesting. I tried to apply to that position, but I didn't ask him. So I see that there is a website. You fill all the files. I put all my files. I wrote a motivation letter and everything, and I applied. And it was rejected after a few months. And what somebody told me much later is that this kind of platforms are sometimes not there for looking for people to apply, but are there because the university forces people to post this kind of positions in this kind of platforms before making the screenings. So sometimes for this to work, you have to contact the team. You have to contact somebody in this that is related to this position for your in order that they take care of your submissions. If not, they are just automatically going to say, "No, this person, we don't know this person," and then they are not going to take it into account.
Any other questions from the audience? No. I have one question. What is next? Like, I think you're about to finish your postdoc, Mauricio. And Nishan, I don't know, you have 1 year as an assistant professor. So what is the next step? Are you staying in your current position for like kind of midterm time? Or you're thinking, okay, this is the next step, or you don't know, I don't know, how does that look like?
Yeah,
Um,
in my case, we got some more funding, so I will be staying here for a little bit longer. I will be staying here for 6 months, starting next year. But the idea is that in France, there is the national research um, there is a establishment that is called the CNRS, where you can apply. And I think one of the things I will have to try is to apply to these positions, because in France they have this good opportunity that if you get a position in this kind of establishment, you have a fixed position for life. And they try to reduce the age of the applicants, the age after thesis. So I have now one opportunity to try to apply to this establishment.
Yeah, in my case, I'm happy at my current position. I think for me, it's more so last year, I was busy, spent a lot of my time on preparing for my certification process and board exams that I had to take to be certified. So I'm finally done with all of those. So now I'm focusing more on, growing my career in medical physics in terms of research, learning new. It's because in our field is very dynamic. Always every day there's like new things happening. There's new technologies emerging. So trying to catch up with that, and also we are constantly upgrading our systems or acquiring new systems. So you have to learn and see how I can use it, or we can, as a group, get projects on that or research. So I'll just continue where I'm at the moment. The end goal would be in my case is that, just get some work experience, and hopefully after the next 10 years to 15 years, maybe I can apply for a more director or chief position. So that'll be sort of my future goal in the next 10, 15 years.
That's pretty cool.
Is your position permanent there, over there, right now? Are you in a tenure track or permanent, because you are assistant?
I couldn't hear him.
He's asking if your current position is like permanent, or kind of like a tenure track or something like that.
So yeah, so my current position, so a lot of our positions are not tenure track. It's also because we are dependent on the medical side. The finance comes from the hospital, so you don't know how reliable is that, or how, protected is that, unlike universities where you have sort of like a protected money for tenure. And also a lot of our positions are not tenured. I mean, there are tenured positions too, but mine's not tenured. However, it's even though it's not tenure, it's an academic position. It's sort of guaranteed. No one's gonna like fire you unless you do something really bad. And as long as we have funding, I am supported by the department. So, and it's being in a medical field, it's hardly unlikely that will happen, that the money goes away or something like that. So I think in that sense, it's pretty. I'm secured for the job.
Okay, so any questions? This is the final open round of questions. I'm gonna give some seconds. So if you have a question, this is yes. Or comments?
I would say that if you like France is a very good place to work, because most of the positions are permanent positions. There are research positions and I don't know what would be the equivalent, but teaching positions, and these are usually permanent. However, there is a lot of competition. Everybody's applying, and nobody's getting it. So it can be very hard to obtain one of these positions. But if you get them, you are in a good position for life.
I might be wrong, but I got the impression that France produces a lot of physicists, so it must be really competitive, right?
It's very competitive. It's very competitive because it's not only French researchers that are applying. It's people from all over the European Union or outside. So a lot of people from Italy, Spain, Germany are competing for these positions.
Yeah.
So a lot of us in this room are graduate students working on PhDs. So for each of you, what is your best advice that you have to a graduate student who's working on their PhD? Just to help us in general for the future.
I mean, I think for me, be going through PhD and residency, I consider that those time as more of like, I mean, as a learning opportunity to learn as much as you can. Um, because, and also when you're working on projects, I feel like the more problems you face, the better you learn. So if you have a project that doesn't have any problems and it just works out all the time, I don't think you learn as much versus somebody who has to overcome multiple hurdles. Because I think at the end of the day, what we're training for is to be a problem solver. And even though there's a big problem, I mean, nobody's done the research, but if it just goes and you don't face any or much of a hurdle, then I think you don't gain as much or learn as much. So try to see how you can, challenge yourself in those areas and try to learn as much as you can. Because at the end of the day, I think what takes you later on, no matter where you go, is the skill set that you learn over that time rather than just your thesis that you give it out or you publish. So it's the tools that will take you to any field or any areas, research topics that we're gonna go. So I guess be mindful of that. So because sometimes you have to learn certain things and you might be like, oh man, I have to learn this, do this, do that. But I think that's where you gain the most out in your PhD.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that the skill set is more important than what you learn. Of course, you have to know the terms and the topics and understand what's happening in your domain of research. But at the end of the day, they are going to ask you why I am hiring you, and you have to show them what are your tool set, what is your skill set, what are the things that you know. And the idea of challenging oneself is very important. One thing that helped me a lot during my research was that I was also in some students association where we were participating in hackathons, mostly related to things related to quantum computing. I'm not working on quantum computing, but I like the subject, so I was working with some other people that were working on quantum computing to participate in these hackathons, and I learned a lot of skills in programming that I didn't learn during my PhD, or that I wouldn't have learned during my PhD if I was not trying to participate in these kinds of events.
Advertisement time. IPT helps for that too. All right.
Yeah, exactly. IPT, all these kinds of challenges, I think they're very good for developing skills.
Any other questions from the audience? Any final remark or comment from our speakers? If not, I want to thank everyone for your time, but especially Nishan and Mauricio that took some time from their busy agenda to be here with us. Thank you again, guys. You're amazing.
If it's possible, could you give us your contact info, for instance, emails?
Yeah, sure.
You just drop it into the Zoom chat.
Yeah, you can, if you want, you can put it on the Zoom chat, or if not, you can send it to me and I'll forward to the people if you want to. So, I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you.
Yeah, and